is Right to Life Radio with John Girardi on Power Talk 96.7 and AM 1400, a production of the Right to Life of Central California.
Well, every
And
Ash
now,
Wednesday,
here's your host, John
we
Girardi.
have this. It's always perfectly timed out at Right to Life. It's almost like we do this on purpose. Every Ash Wednesday is not just the start of Lent for Catholics and others. It's also the start of 40 Days for Life, our 40 Days for Life campaign, which we have every spring and fall here at Right to Life of Central California. 40 days of praying outside the abortion clinic in Fresno on Fulton Street, the Planned Parenthood Clinic. With me to talk about the reason why we go out there, the reason why this work is so important, as we have every first Saturday of the month, Linda Teliha, our Right to Life Sidewalk advocate, counselor. Welcome, Linda, to Right to Life Radio.
Thank you again.
All
I'm
right.
back.
Yes. All right. So this is our Stories from the Sidewalk segment where Linda kind of talks with us about stuff she's experiencing out there. One of the cool things that we've seen in the last month or two, as many of you know, Right to Life has a subsidiary corporation now called the Obria Medical Clinics of Central California, which is our pro-life prenatal healthcare clinic. And we've seen a couple of patients now who are coming straight from the sidewalk and interacting with Linda over to our clinic to receive prenatal care. So, Linda, you have a story about one of those people. So why don't we'll give her a fictitious name for HIPAA compliance purposes. So we'll call her Susie. So tell us a little bit about Susie and your interactions with her and some of how that came about.
Okay. So I'll kind of introduce her the way that I happened upon her.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when you're out there, I'll be in the building and be like, gosh, this is so discouraging. I don't really want to go out there.
No one's being friendly.
I'm not going out there right now. And then I'll think, I need to get out there.
Right.
So I was having one of those days and I was like, I'm not going out there. Okay, fine, I'll go out there. So I go out there and the very first person that I talk to, I say, hey, would you like a flower? And she was like, yes, I would love a flower. Mm-hmm. And I was like,
all right.
There
we go. There it goes. There it happens. Yeah.
I don't.
And just so people are aware, so Linda's kind of MO for engaging with people is that you go out with a bunch of flowers.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty good icebreaker is to, instead of saying, hey, would you like some literature about abortion?
That
is to say,
doesn't
hey,
really work.
would you like a flower? So she took your flower.
Yeah. So, and then with that, I've even had people come up and go, why are you giving me a flower?
Yeah.
And I'll say the truth. And I'll say, well,
yeah,
to get you to talk to me.
Yeah.
And they'll go, really? And I'm like, well, you're here.
Yeah. Here, and mission accomplished.
Now
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you everything you know.
Yeah.
No, but they're pretty funny about it. But anyway, so she was like, yeah, I'll take the flower. And I asked her what was going on. And she was like, I'm pregnant. I don't want to have an abortion, but my man wants me to have an abortion and I don't know what to do. And I said, well, would you like to talk? Mm-hmm. And she was like, yes, I really would. And that's different too, because usually I kind of have to coax people over to talk about it because they kind of have made up their mind.
Sure.
Well, her mind was kind of made up where she didn't really want to do it, but felt like there was nothing else.
That was the pressure. Yeah.
So
which with so many of the people you interact with, like that's the that's the sentiment. It's that I don't really have any other choice here. I don't have any other options. I don't know what else to do.
Someone's told them to do it.
Yeah.
And that someone was or is very important in their life. And so they think if they please them, everything will be fine.
Right. Which, it's really, and it's so sad to see the statistics of women who get an abortion at the behest of their boyfriend, significant other, whatever, the enormous percentages of those relationships that end in breakup.
The relationships end. There's high risk of suicide, anxiety, depression, alcoholism, drug addiction, infertility, cancer.
Just a lot of bad stuff.
Yeah, those are the statistics. So anyway, off track a little.
No, you're fine.
So we ended up going to the building and talking, and she, poured out her story. And then, as I often do, I dialed up Sarah for FaceTime. Mm-hmm. She just has another approach because she's younger and she's just different than I am. She's like, oh, yeah, I'm so sorry. I totally get it. And we're going to love you, baby.
Sarah Goring, who's our part-time administrative assistant at Right to Life, but full-time helper-outer for Linda when it comes to sidewalk stuff. Yeah.
She's so good at it.
Yeah.
So we ended up talking and it went from, I can't do this. I'm so scared, shaking, hugging me, whatever, to she gets up and she's ready to go. And she goes, you know what? I've already raised 3 kids and they're good. One's a valedictorian. The other is this and the other's that. I can do this. I don't need a man. If he doesn't want this baby, too bad for him. And she stands up and she high fives me.
Way to go.
Like total turnaround. She just needed time to
think it through.
Think it through in her own mind.
Yeah.
I mean, this person is educated. She has a master's degree.
Oh, wow.
And, you know, she works and she has raised her kids. And so she just was in a conundrum, a crisis at the time.
And it is interesting to me how many of the women pursuing abortion, I think a lot of times we have this picture in our head.
I know
and
just what you're going to say.
And it's not totally wrong because there are instances of this, but I think a lot of times we have this image in our head of it's scared 18-year-olds pregnant for the first time, and it's not always that. In fact, I think it's very often it's older women, who maybe already have a few kids, who just it's purely. Let's just
social
pressures, financial pressures. Yeah, I mean, it's probably fairly evenly distributed throughout, but it's not exclusively 16-year-olds who aren't ready to have babies. It's sometimes older women who need the help they need is not. It's not physical health problems. It's they need various kinds of social support. Or at least to think through that how they can put together a game plan for how to support this child.
That's really a great way to put it, the social support, because that's exactly what she needs. And we know this now because we have had lunch with her 2 times. I mean, she just wants to connect and know that there's, a couple people who are out there. And that's one of the things we say at Right to Life is that we are there for you and we mean it. And so we have found that by setting up a date for lunch like the next week, that works really well in them thinking, okay, I have some support. They really don't need that much. They just want to be able to talk and say, oh yeah, that guy was a jerk, or I'm good, or I'm so lucky,
or just
I feel good.
I mean, just to get another person's perspective and take a step back, be able to see the forest for the trees, which it seems like that's what this gal needed, was just to take a step. Okay, well, I have raised these kids before. If this guy doesn't want to be a part of this, okay, then in the grand scheme of things, is that, does that have to be the deal breaker here? And that's
kind
the
of
thing.
Getting the community that we're a little bit missing at this point in history.
Sure.
We don't have as much. Before we would have, grandmother, mother, whatever.
Oh, sure.
While she has some of that, there's also the stigma and also the glamorization of abortion that is affecting this opportunity to interact and support people who are choosing life.
Oh, sure. Well, glamorization or normalization or, I mean, Planned Parenthood has they have a whole PR wing that's dedicated to working with Hollywood to show abortion in more television programs and more movies as this normal, even empowering thing. Yeah. And people get influenced by that stuff. And
So anyway, our next step with her is Friday I am. I think Sarah has to work.
Okay.
Actually in the office. I may dial her up on FaceTime, but I'm going with her to Obria.
Wonderful.
For her ultrasound.
Have her ultrasound. Awesome. And that's such a cool thing that we can have this, and we want to help keep developing this over the course of time, this kind of continuum of care where
a bridge,
where we can initially interact with someone outside of Planned Parenthood, if there are resources they can get from Pregnancy Care Center, and for their medical care to come to Obria for ultrasounds and for the course of their pregnancy. It's a really cool thing. Now, for the last bit of this segment, I want to transition here to highlight this new thing that Linda and one of our volunteers named Zyra, who we love Zyra. She's a longtime volunteer outside of Planned Parenthood that they're kind of spearheading. It's our little Right to Life running club. So running/walking club. So I want, Linda, I'll give you the floor on what this club is and how people can learn more about it.
Okay. So I want to explain that we originally were going to have a running club, and then I was talking to some of the donors and friends and stuff, and they're like, well, wait a minute. I
just want to walk.
I don't run. Can I be a part of that? Can I just walk? And I was like, well, sure, go ahead. Yeah. So we put together this kind of package thing where we are going to kind of support. Zaida's going to do practices and meetings and stuff for those who want to participate in several of the runs that are sponsored throughout the
locally.
the town
So
and
different
stuff,
different
yeah.
community like races and
Yeah.
stuff for a group of pro-life supporters to join as a team.
So yeah, people look for teams, and our team is called Move for Life, and we have a couple of obligations that people have to follow through on to be on our team because we're going to be really good.
There you go. Yeah.
And then as walkers, we are right now putting together an app where people can connect and upload their miles that they're walking, and then about once a month we'll do a little prize for those who've walked the most miles, and then just kind of
cool.
Support life and encourage pro living.
Yeah. Well, and just to as a forum for raising awareness about right to life and stuff we do, for encouraging people to volunteer in other aspects of right to life's work in addition to running and walking and stuff.
It came about because the people who were against the pro life were always saying, "Oh, you only care about the fetus," for lack of a better way to say.
yeah.
And I started thinking, and I'm like, no, we care about the whole life, and so that's where this came about. That you don't have to stop living because you have a baby. And, and the mom can participate. They can push the baby, and they can be active and feel good and feel healthy and be a part of something.
Yeah.
So,
well, and also we've got for those of you watching on the YouTube channel, we've got some. That's right behind you.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's on the back of the chair. We've got some cool T-shirts that you can get. So we've got our Move for Life T-shirts. There we go. Move for Life. Pro-life from start to finish. There we go. Very fancy schmancy. And
you get
also,
super involved and you move up a level.
Then
We've got this special shirt.
Get a little windbreaker dealie, which is very cool.
It's kind of a pullover, thin shirt.
Pullover thing, yeah. So anyway, also for those of you listening on the radio, I'm sure this is fascinating. For those of you listening on the radio, it's the colors are kind of neon yellow and green, so you can see it. It's visible from space. So and it's basically so that if we have a group of people running in a race, so you guys already participated in your first race.
Yes.
You were at the Back the Blue police department race that was just this past weekend. Which is super cool. So
I didn't run in it.
Oh, okay.
Maybe someday. And someday maybe John is going to run in it because I hear you're a runner.
I probably could. I do about 10 miles every weekend in some capacity or another. So I could probably pitch
Raphael,
in.
there you go.
I mentioned that
I've seen you run on the soccer field.
I mentioned to our employee George that I ran 10 miles over the weekend, and he said on purpose. I'm like, no,
we'll get
really.
him going too, and pretty soon we'll just have everybody out there.
There you go. All right, well, thank you, Linda. It's always good to have you for stories on the sidewalk. All right, folks.
Thanks.
When we come back, we'll be talking with California Family Council CEO Jonathan Keller. Also, by the way, this Saturday is the kickoff rally for 40 Days for Life, 10 a.m. to noon at our facility right next to Planned Parenthood at 616 North Fulton Street in Fresno. Our kickoff rally, free food, 10 to noon outside of Planned Parenthood, 616 North Fulton Street at our outreach center. I'll be there, Linda will be there, etc. All right, thank you all, and we'll be back with more Right to Life Radio. Right to Life Radio. A guaranteed way for my wife to stop listening to the show is if I break out my Forrest Gump impression, which annoys her more than almost anything I do.
Now, here's the question, John. Who is more annoyed by that impression? Your wife or your oldest daughter, who, as I saw on Twitter, is auditioning for the role of stern governess?
Yes. Okay, so my oldest daughter, Madeline, does not suffer fools well, apparently. So we went over to my parents' house, and my dad was being silly with them. Every time they go to my parents' house, my parents have a grandfather clock, and they like to watch my dad wind the grandfather clock, every time they go over. And my dad was joking around and being silly, and my 7-year-old daughter, Maddie, looks right at my dad and says, oh, shoot, what the heck did she say? She said, oh my gosh, I'm completely brain farting. She said... She basically shut him down.
It was Papa.
Completely.
Please pay attention to what you're doing. Yeah,
Papa, please concentrate on what you're doing. Papa, can you just concentrate on what you're doing, please? That was what she said to him. And that's my family of no nonsense young ladies. All right, now, our thanks to Linda for doing stories for the Sidewalk for us as we've whittled away half of this segment. All right, Jonathan.
Yes.
Let's talk about the national news with pro-life stuff, and then we will get to some of the local news with the attempt to establish a Planned Parenthood in Visalia. But first, I want to talk about the national stuff.
Yes.
The U.S. Senate voted on the Women's Health Protection Act, the poorly named Women's Health Protection Act. This is a bill that would basically just codify Roe v. Wade. It would codify Roe v. Wade. Basically, instead of Roe v. Wade and legal abortion being mandated as emanating from the Constitution, this would just say this is a new federal law saying every state has to have legal abortion for all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason, blah, 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 blah.
Which, John, can I just point out something?
Okay.
If you recall, when we talked about this on a prior segment, one of the from our friend Bill Crystal, one of the weeping,
not our friend,
the wailing and gnashing of teeth, the hand wringing was, oh my gosh, I can't believe that Republicans, after 49 years of saying that this should be a 10th Amendment states' rights issue, you're talking about federal legislation? Yeah, Bill, and this is before the Republicans even have a chance to take back the Senate or the House, before there's another Republican president. The Democrats are trying to pass federal legislation on abortion.
Yeah, so Bill Crystal, who is sort of all of a sudden became a liberal because of Donald Trump, which doesn't seem like the best idea for why you should abandon all of your previously held political commitments just because Donald Trump was around. Crystal was shocked and appalled that a group of Republicans in the Senate said that they don't like abortion and was trying to say, oh, do Republicans support federal bans on abortion? Meanwhile, the Democrats just tried to have a vote in the Senate to have a federal abortion mandate, have abortion be mandated via federal law. So, for all of his pearl clutching over Republicans wanting to limit abortion federally, which this group of Republicans hadn't even said that.
Nope.
He's now pearl clutching over. No pearl clutching has been seen over Democrats' attempts to nationalize abortion further. Now, what is the point of this bill? The point of this bill is Democrats they suspect very strongly that the Supreme Court is going to overturn Roe v. Wade this June. And so, because of that, they know that a bunch of red states will try to ban abortion. So what they want to do is pass a federal law, just a normal law, not a constitutional amendment, that not a Supreme Court decision that purports to interpret the Constitution, but just a normal federal law, majority of the House, majority of the Senate, president signs it, to mandate all the same stuff that's in Roe v. Wade, basically. Okay, to mandate legal abortion for all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason, to do all these things. So this bill had already passed the House of Representatives. It passed the House of Representatives several months ago, and the Senate held a vote on it this past Monday. And the Senate vote was 46 in favor of this legislation and 48 opposed. So the bill loses. Republicans did not even really need to filibuster it because Democrats simply did not have the votes.
Didn't even have the votes.
Yeah.
So, and, John, to his credit, there was a lone voice.
One Democrat voted against it.
A single solitary Democrat, Mr. Joe Manchin from West Virginia.
The true leader of the free world whose name is Joe.
Yes.
The most important man in Washington named Joe. Joe Manchin voted against this legislation. So,
bravo.
Kudos to him. Kudos to Joe Manchin for doing that. And now this legislation, even if Manchin had voted for it, Republicans in the Senate could have filibustered it.
Yep.
So it's not like this was going to pass anyway. But this is a terrifying piece of legislation because basically what the Democrats are sort of showing their hand in is, if they genuinely get a majority in the Senate, like a real majority, not like what they have now. Now they only have 50 of 100 votes in the Senate, and they only have a majority by virtue of Kamala Harris being a tiebreaker. But if they genuinely got a majority in the Senate, Democrats have shown a lot of openness to getting rid of the filibuster rule for something that they deem to be really, really important. And I think they view abortion rights as really, really important. So if they were ever to get a real substantial majority in the Senate to do that, if they were ever to get along with the presidency, along with the House, this is something we could be seeing is yet again another nationalization of the abortion issue. So that is a fearful specter, and it makes me hope that Republicans, should they ever get really solid majorities in the House and the Senate someday, along with the presidency, that maybe they would think about not unilaterally disarming, but maybe doing some more aggressive stuff to pursue federal legislation to limit abortion. All right, when we come back, we'll talk about this issue a little bit more and the comments of U.S. Senator from Georgia, Raphael Warnock, his bizarre views on federal regulation of health care. That's next on Right to Life Radio. Right to Life Radio. Thank you all so much for tuning in. All right, Mr. Jonathan.
Yes.
The U.S. Senate voted down the Women's Health Protection Act, so-called. It is not about women's health. It is about abortion. This is the most extreme piece of pro-choice legislation to ever get introduced even in the U.S. Congress, I would say. And thankfully, it lost 46 to 48. Joe Manchin was the one Democrat who voted against it. It was all Republicans voting against, along with Manchin, and all Democrats voting for it. And one of the comments that I thought was most interesting and sort of in response to the vote were those made by Senator Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock, as he goes by on his Twitter handle, which I thought was very interesting, that he thinks being a senator is more important than, Reverend. That, I guess being a senator is more important than serving God. And Raphael Warnock is a U.S. senator from Georgia. He was just elected in the Georgia special election in January of 2021, I believe.
Yes.
That was the runoff election.
That's right.
Okay.
January 5th, 2021.
And he's up again for re-election this November because he was filling in a vacancy. And he is himself a pastor. And he has sort of bragged about that he has always been a pro-choice pastor. And he gives this argument against regulating abortion by the government that I find to be unbelievably absurd. But I want to talk about it because it fits in. It's this way of arguing that so many people engage in, where they find like one slogan, and that's their whole basis for their decision making. And they act as though because they've latched onto a slogan that kind of sounds like it makes, quote, common sense. By the way,
it's poll tested and focus grouped.
Yeah. And by the way, let me just say, I hate the phrase common sense, because generally when people argue that something is common sense, the fact that you're arguing it indicates that it's not common. Because if someone disagrees with your sense, the sense is no longer common. It is not shared between you. It is not common between you. Ergo, not common sense. Anyway, people will sometimes appeal to, well, I'm just trying to argue basic common sense. And it's like, well, it's obviously not common sense if people disagree with you. So don't just argue. You're basically saying, I'm right because I'm right. Like, no, you need to argue better than that. Anyway, so people come up with these kind of little slogans around something so critical, like the issue of, should abortion be legal? Is abortion murder or isn't it? Like these incredibly important moral questions that people are sort of, and by people, I mean elected officials, who represent entire U.S. states in the United States Senate, the most, important deliberative body in the Western Hemisphere. He's apparently content with settling this moral question with a slogan. So here's what Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock has to say in response to his vote and co-sponsorship of the Women's Health Protection Act. His vote for and co-sponsorship of the Women's Health Protection Act. He says this: I have always been a pro-choice pastor, and I believe a doctor's office is too small for a patient, their doctors, and the U.S. government. I'm a proud co-sponsor of the Women's Health Protection Act, and the Senate should pass it as soon as possible. All right, Jonathan. Now, this is a rich statement that a doctor's office is too small for a patient, their doctors, and the U.S. government. This is a rich statement coming from Democrats who last I checked, were not exactly libertarians as far as their viewpoints of what government involvement there should be with the practice of medicine. There are layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of federal and state regulation of the practice of medicine. You think your doctor's office is too small for the patient, the doc, and the federal government? Too late, because the federal government. Let's just talk about a couple of these things.
Obamacare.
Let's talk about the Food and Drug Administration, the Center for Medicare and Medicaid, whatever services regulation, whatever it is. Medicaid itself, Obamacare. I mean, how
John,
many? The entire I think it's the single largest department of the federal government.
I think that is correct.
Is the federal, as far as dollars in its budget, maybe it's like the military and then the Department of HHS, the Health and Human Services. What do you think HHS does? It's the federal government regulating the practice of medicine.
You got to remember. So I think I need to double check this, but I think the Defense Department is. I'm going to do some quick on the fly Google
sleuthing about whether it's actually the Pentagon or HHS that has more money.
Well,
or the Department of Defense.
You got to remember that, of course, the Defense Department is responsible for fighting all the nation's wars and for all sorts of different things like that.
Yeah.
But
little unimportant things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the rough budget for the annual budget for the Defense Department is $721.5 billion. This is for fiscal year 2020. And again, this is according to Wikipedia, but I definitely trust Wikipedia on this department.
Okay.
All right. They have a total of 2.86 million employees.
This is the Department of Defense.
The DoD. This includes all of the civilian contractors and employees. This includes all of the active duty military, all the National Guard and Reserve.
Okay.
So the total, 2.86 million and a $720 billion budget.
Okay.
By contrast, HHS, well, they only have 79,000 employees.
So
they have
HHS,
a fraction of the number of employees.
Okay, so HHS is 79,000 employees.
Compared to 2.86 million employees. So it's only about, what is that, 1/40th of the employees?
Much smaller.
But their budget is not $720 billion. Mm-hmm. It is $1.63 trillion.
HHS is $1.63 trillion. That's their budget?
Yes. Yeah. It is more than double the entire budget
of the Department of Defense.
Yes. Okay. And again, that includes, we're not just talking about, you got aircraft carriers.
That includes all the money spent on Medicare, all the money spent on Medicaid.
Yes.
Yeah. So
talk about too big for the doctor's office.
Yes, exactly. So
smaller than an aircraft carrier.
Yeah. So for Senator Warnock to say, well, a doctor's office is too small for a patient, their doctors, and the U.S. government, as Jonathan has pointed out, it's over $1 trillion per year that the federal government spends on the practice of healthcare. Now, beyond that, this is a metaphor that Senator Warnock is using. The doctor's office is too small for the patient, the doctor, and the U.S. government. And yet he's acting as though, that's conclusive. Well, analogies limp, all right? It's kind of like another thing, but it's not exactly like. And any analogy will limp because any analogy, no two comparative things are exactly equivalent. And the federal government does not take up space in the physical space in a doctor's office. It's a silly argument. Yes, there is room in a doctor's office for the federal government, as in there is room in a doctor's office for law. There is room in a doctor's office for basic laws that protect human beings from private violence to exist. There's enough room in a doctor's office for California and federal laws that, prevent me from engaging in fraud, that prevent me from beating people up, that prevent me from lying about someone who's being sex trafficked,
prevent you from practicing medicine without a license.
Right. The California, and I can guarantee you that the Obria Medical Clinics of Central California, in spite of the fact that it's only 1,700 square feet, 1,690 square feet, in fact, we only have 4 exam rooms, there is enough room there for a lot of California regulation and a lot of federal regulation. Trust me, I know. Okay? So this notion that the government, like, since when, by the way, and I'm saying this not with any kind of value judgment on this, Democrats love regulating the healthcare industry.
Yep.
It's a big deal for them. Okay? Like, Democrats have never been libertarians when it comes to the healthcare industry. Okay? What do you think Obamacare is? What do you think? I mean, this notion that all of a sudden pro-choice people, for the sake of this stupid rhetorical device, are going to try to argue, well, there's no room in a doctor's office for the federal government. You support all kinds of regulation in healthcare. Now, and furthermore, let's also note that what most people are talking about with regulating abortion is, now I want people to talk about it more, but it's not like there are a ton of federal abortion bans that Congress is kicking around. The Republicans in Congress are kicking around. What we're talking about more with the looming overturning of Roe v. Wade, which, pray God it happens, are state regulations of abortion. And regulation of public health is a classic thing that's perfectly within the ambit of state governments to regulate. It always has been. So for Warnock to act as though, there's just no room in a doctor's office for the U.S. government. Yeah, there is room in a doctor's office for the U.S. government or for the state government. A state government that says, hey, you can't abuse kids. A state government that says, hey, you can't put patients at various kinds of unreasonable risk. U.S. government that says, hey, don't prescribe this drug for this. There's a lot of space, okay? Because it's not actually about physical space. It's it's just an idiotic metaphor that he's using. All right. When we return, we'll close out the show by talking about plans for a new abortion clinic in Visalia. Stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss it.